and the doctor's not there, whatever.
Okay. Alright, I'm streaming. Do you remember what happened?
Oh,
So, they're at Blackwater Mansion, and they think they find the exit, and they're like, you have to go through one at a time. So, they go through one at a time, and Mingyi sends them all. But then Hua Chang goes through at the same time as Shilian, and he's like, "Oh, it's just cause I'm a ghost." And then Shilian ends up putting together that Ming Yi was suspicious, and like all the things add up that it could be Ming Yi that's Blackwater. And then we came back to Shi Jingxuan, and Shi Jingxuan's still on the island and runs into Ming Yi, and Shilian's in Shi Jingxuan's body, sharing the same body, and was trying to act like
right.
not suspicious. And I think the last thing that happened, um, don't call him Ming Shang anymore. The real Ming Shang's long dead, Shilian said. How do you know? Do you see? Did you see? Shi Jingxuan pressed him. I wasn't the only one who saw, Shilian said. You did too. The real Lord Earthmaster was the skeleton worshipped inside the Netherwater Manor. Why do you think he couldn't properly control the Earthmaster's crescent shovel? It's because it didn't belong to him in the first place. The one behind you, his original name given centuries ago, was He Xuan. After cultivating into a supreme, his name became Blackwater Demon Xuan. He devoured the real Reverend of Empty Words and had it chase you. He imprisoned and murdered the real Earthmaster. He took on the Earthmaster's name long ago and assumed his position in the heavens. As he finished, he froze. A hand had tapped his shoulder without warning. So that's what Shilian's accusing Mingyi of, who's Shi Qingchuan, who's Shi Qingchuan's like oldest friend for like thousands of years or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So now we're on chapter 65, and we don't know where Shiwudu is right now, because I mean
Okay.
if he said that he was sending Shi Jingxuan away and Shi Jingxuan's still here, where the hell is Shiwudu?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mingyi's voice came from behind. What are you grumbling about all alone? Shi Jingxuan's body stiffened. I. Shilian wanted to help him respond, but Shi Jingxuan's tongue was refusing his control. It couldn't be helped. His most trusted, beloved friend had turned out to be the one he feared the most, hiding right beside him all this time. Now that there was no one around to help, there was no telling what he planned to do. Who wouldn't be scared? Suddenly, Mingyi's fingers dug in. Pain flared in Shi Jingxuan's shoulder as he was pushed to the ground. At the same time, a ghostly pale white hand lunged from the creek and groped the empty space that Shi Jingxuan's neck had occupied just moments before. A water ghost. The hand's attack missed thanks to Mingyi's timely push, and Mingyi parried with a palm blast. Screams came from beneath the water. Whatever creature lurked beneath was probably obliterated by that strike. Shi Jingxuan still lay sprawled on the ground, where he'd been shoved, and Mingyi pulled him up. What were you thinking, using some random water at the Blackwater Demon Lair to wash your face? Shi Jingxuan had just washed his face with the water of a creek that was contaminated with the putrefying corpses of water ghosts. He should have felt disgusted, but he had no mind right now to notice such details. His face and hair were still dripping wet. He was as drenched as a drowned dog and looked equally as lost and forlorn. Mind completely blank, he let Ming Yi pull him up and followed along behind him. Truthfully, everything about Ming Shang had always smelled a bit fishy, if he thought about it. He was the Earth Master, so he drew every teleportation array waypoint along the journey. The technique should have been his specialty, but he ran into problems at every juncture. The four of them were inexplicably sent from Puchi Shrine to the town of Fugu. And then, when it came time to transport the Wind and Water Masters from Blackwater Island, there was another hiccup. Was it because the transportation chamber was in disrepair? Was it something else causing ghostly mischief? Was the mastermind omnipotent? Why overthink the issue? The simplest answer was most likely Ming Yi had been meddling all along. When the Windmaster was taken away by the Reverend of Empty Words, it was Ming Yi who had allowed it by losing sight of him. He had also been the one to discover the Windmaster after he had been robbed of his powers. He had always stayed by Shi Chuan's side and knew his fears and tendencies like the back of his hand, and he was certainly close enough to the Windmaster to know his verbal password. Wielding his command of the Reverend of Empty Words, he was also the one who coerced Shi Chuan into opening the doors to the protection array at the Terrace of Cascading Wine. At the Temple of Wind and Water, he cracked the establishment plaque with his own hands without a hint of remorse. Perhaps it was a necessarily evil. Perhaps it was a necessarily evil. Why does it say that? Or
What
perhaps it
about
was an entirely purposeful one. What audacious arrogance to openly dismantle his enemy's establishment plaque with such a chivalrous excuse, and his enemy had to be grateful for it. It wasn't like Shilian hadn't been suspicious at times, with so many little odd coincidences. He tried to probe by asking those three questions, but he'd never imagined that something this inconceivable, this audacious, could happen. That a ghost had impersonated a heavenly official and hidden among them for so long. Ship sinking Blackwater kept a low profile. Of course he did, since a low profile was a necessity for someone existing under a different identity for so many years. Ming Yi had devoured the Reverend of Empty Words, and its powers were devoured along with it. He was able to command it as his minion and wield its might as his own. His responses to Shilian's three questions were flawless, because a supreme Ghost King could hardly be burdened by the unique quirks of a minion's species. If he wanted to speak the truth, he could speak the truth. If he wanted to deceive, he could lie as he willed. And then there was that skeleton. Its dexterous hands and feet matched the expected physique of the Earthmaster. Why worship it in the Nether Water manner? Because those were the remains of a heavenly official. If they weren't treated with solemn respect and were buried carelessly, the bones wouldn't rest in peace. No coffin would hold. And so he was forced to worship it with grand ceremony within his own halls. With all that said, there was something else that tipped Shilian off to his real identity. It was the skeleton's lunge. The Watermaster had asked why the skeleton would experience terminal lucidity, and Ming Yi quickly tried to brush it off by claiming it was reacting to his flippant statement, "As long as it's not in our way, it doesn't matter who it was." But that wasn't what had provoked the real Ming Yi at all. It was the part that came after. Lord Earthmaster. He was the real Earthmaster, and his impersonator was standing right before him, deliberately and nonchalantly leading the rest of them astray. He hadn't only meddled all this time. To escape suspicion, Ming Yi would sometimes do just the opposite and nudge them back on the right track. He once said to Hua Cheng, "You really do have spies in the heavens," as if he wasn't that very spy. That, of course, also explained Hua Cheng's sarcastic response. "Don't you already know that?" He'd been mocking this game of pretend. However, the word spy was probably inaccurate. It was more likely an agreement between those two. Specifically, an agreement about the exchange of information. The two Supreme Ghost Kings cooperated for their mutual benefit. Wasn't that a win-win? Blackwater infiltrated the upper court and observed all movement in the heavenly realm, big and small. Hua Cheng took root in the mortal realm, increasing the number of worshippers. It remained to be seen whether they cooperated in other matters. When Junwu sent the Earthmaster to infiltrate Ghost City, it was no different from attempting to flood the oceanic temple of the Dragon King, or sending thieves to raid a bandit's lair. Completely futile. It seemed that only two major accidents occurred while he was undercover. The first, that ascending fire dragon spell. An impostor obviously wouldn't investigate such a pointless charade. Shilian was more inclined to think that the real Ming Yi had cast the ascending fire dragon spell during a botched escape attempt. In order to
Bless
sneak
you?
into the upper court in the guise of a total stranger, he must have a thorough understanding of the person being impersonated. Therefore, the impersonated individual must be kept alive to pry out details as they become relevant over the years. Information about their life experience, their skills, their methods of manipulating their spiritual device, and so on. The fake Ming Yi likely kidnapped and imprisoned the real Ming Yi right after he passed his heavenly tribulation, but before his ascension. An impostor would have been easily detected if the real Ming Yi had already known other heavenly officials. The escape and the subsequent spell were accidents, which was why Hua Cheng received the news. He had to leave to help his collaborator clean up the mess. And right at that time, Shilian received the Ghost City rescue mission from Junwu. While he hadn't thought so at the time, in hindsight, he realized that the operation had gone a little too smoothly. Shilian rescued the Earthmaster from the dungeons of Paradise Manor, but how did he discover said dungeon? He had spotted a cursed shackle on the wrist of Hua Cheng's ghost mask subordinate and then saw him sneaking around Paradise Manor. A cursed shackle was a mark of humiliation. When heavenly officials were banished, they would normally hide their shackles from the eyes of others, but the ghost-masked man wore it openly on his wrist. Why did he hide it again on Shilian's subsequent Ghost City visits? If it wasn't simple carelessness, the only other explanation was that it was done intentionally to grab Shilian's attention and lead him to the imprisoned fake Earthmaster. The real Mingyi, the one who'd really set off the distress signal, was likely killed after that. It was impossible to completely destroy his remains and remove all evidence, but keeping the flesh intact would be too great a risk to masquerade, so it was dissolved until he was nothing but white bones. The second accident was Shi Jingchuan seeking Shilian's help after getting spooked by the return of the Reverend of Empty Words. It was obvious that Hua Cheng didn't want Shilian to be pulled into this affair, which was why Ming Yi declared at Puchi Shrine that coming here was not my will. While they searched for Shi Jingchuan at the Terrace of Cascading Wine, Hua Cheng likely left to rendezvous with Ming Yi and demand an explanation for what was happening. Shilian had no opening to explain any of this to Shi Jingchuan, but Shi Jingchuan was clearly thinking through each detail on his own. The hands hidden within his sleeves trembled non-stop. Hold on, I'm gonna get some water, because I forgot. But remember when Hua Cheng punched Ming Yi into the fucking ground? He's been,
Yes.
palling around with this guy for centuries, and he's like, he knew his bullshit was happening, and he was like, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. Alright, hold on. Okay, I'm back. Also, do you remember in the first season when they were, they first met, these two, and they were disguised as women, and Hua Cheng
Yeah.
pulled a face? They were just, staring at each other. Bro was
Yeah.
laughing at him turning into a woman. What? What do you want to say to me? Oh. I thought you were waiting to say something.
No,
Oh, okay.
I was listening.
Oh, okay. Well, usually you're not listening, so.
Oh, okay. I listen all the time. You're the one that does not listen to
Okay.
me.
Okay. As the two walked side by side, Shilian's mind was churning. Where in the world had Shiwudu gone? Shiwudu was the first to leave via the array, and Ming Yi was last. He shouldn't have been able to jump over Shi Jingchuan to do anything to Shiwudu, which meant that there were three possibilities. First, Shiwudu was sent elsewhere. Second, something was waiting wherever Shiwudu had been sent, and he had become its victim. Third, Shiwudu left on his own. If it was the first or second possibility, There was no reason for Ming Yi to keep this act of searching for Shi Wudu in front of Shi Qingxuan. Having thought that far, Shilian heard Ming Yi ask, "Where's your golden pendant?" Shi Qingxuan still hadn't recovered, but Shilian was filled with dread. Ming Yi had to ask the question a few times before Shi Qingxuan managed a, "Huh?" "Didn't you say that you and your brother used your golden essences to forge those longevity lockets?" Ming Yi said gruffly. "And that they'll cry out if their masters are hurt?" Shi Qingxuan told Ming Yi everything, so he of course also knew how this particular spiritual device worked, which meant he was going to use the golden pendant to find Shi Wudu. But my scratch is healed," Shi Qingxuan objected. "That's easy to solve," Ming Yi said coldly, raising his hand. "Is he going to
Whoa.
hurt Lord Windmaster?" Shilian tensed, ready to go on the defensive. But unexpectedly, Ming Yi squeezed the clotted over gash in his own arm and began to ooze blood again. "Give me the pendant. I'll wear it." Shilian couldn't help but be awed at the scene playing out before him. Even if this was an act, his ability to take it this far was astounding. He now understood why Shi Qingxuan thought so highly of Ming Yi. Someone like this would truly be worth befriending, if not for the malicious, murderous intent lurking beneath the surface. Shi Qingxuan was still hesitant, too scared to move. The moment he handed over the longevity locket, the two golden necklaces would cry out for each other. Shi Wudu would surely come find him when he noticed. Ming Yi furrowed his brow. "Are you scared stupid?" "No," Shi Qingxuan said. "Actually, this lock, did I never tell you? It only works if I'm the one wearing it." Ming Yi looked doubtful. "Really?" Shi Qingxuan clutched his longevity locket with a death grip and gave a hard nod. "That's right." Ming Yi stared at him for a moment, but ultimately seemed to abandon the idea. He glanced at the reopened gash on his own arm and didn't say another word. Just then, the longevity locket around Shi Qingxuan's neck started vibrating. Color drained from Shi Qingxuan's face. Ming Yi reacted immediately and started moving in the direction the longevity locket pointed. "Lord Watermaster is over there." The golden locket's resonance meant that Shi Wudu was wounded. He'd been perfectly well when he entered the array, so what had hurt him since then? Shilian could sense that Shi Qingxuan was torn. He was anxious to go, but at the same time very reluctant to do so. They were trapped in Blackwater Lake's illusion, and there was no one else on the island who could help. Pei Ming was building a coffin boat outside the illusion and waiting for their return, and Shi Qingxuan was currently mortal. If Shi Wudu was injured, they'd have nowhere to turn for help. How could they possibly escape if they delivered themselves right to the master's doorstep? They hurried to follow in the lock's wake. Shi Qingxuan tried speaking up. "Ming, Shang, I think it's a trap. It's probably best not to go." "What trap?" Ming Yi said. To answer him, Shi Qingxuan spun a bold-faced lie. "How could my brother possibly get hurt? It can't be him over there." Unfortunately, unlike Shi Qingxuan, Ming Yi still had a firm hold on logic. "We're in a Supreme Ghost King's lair. Lord Watermaster might not have what it takes to protect himself. Let's go there and take a look first." Shi Qingxuan couldn't think of a reason not to go, and Shilian was equally stumped. He watched in silence, planning to play it by ear. They followed the longevity locket, using its vibration as a guide to grow closer and closer to the target, until finally they found Shi Wudu curled in on himself on the ground. He was holding his stomach, and he looked distressed and in immense pain. "Gah!" Shi Qingxuan cried. He rushed over, with Ming Yi trailing close behind. However, when they approached Shi Wudu, the prone figure leapt to his feet and erupted into maniacal laughter as he pulled Shi Qingxuan into a hug. Shi Qingxuan was utterly bewildered as he stood enveloped in those arms, and he only belatedly realized how twisted the man's face was. This wasn't Shi Wudu. It was only a madman dressed in his robes and wearing his golden locket pendant. Shi Qingxuan... Oh yeah, do you remember the madmen running around everywhere? Shi Qingxuan hadn't even opened his
Yes.
mouth to speak when Ming Yi abruptly collapsed next to him. His chest now had a hole in it the size of a fist, and his blood spilled upon the
Oh
ground.
my god.
A figure in white leapt from a tree, grabbed Shi Qingxuan, and dragged him along as he fled. "Run!" Upon closer inspection, Shilian saw that it was the real Shi Wudu. "Gah?" Shi Qingxuan exclaimed. Don't talk, just come with me. He's no good, Shiwuru ordered in a hushed, urgent voice. In a flash, Shilian understood that what had happened. As it turned out, Shiwuru wasn't one to be underestimated. He knew something was off the moment he walked out of the transportation array's chamber and saw he was still in the Netherwater Manor. Shiwuru didn't overthink things like Shilian, and he was much sharper. He immediately suspected Ming Yi, so he hid in the shadows to watch and determine what he was up to. He and Shi Qingchuan were probably sent to different locations, otherwise he would have brought Shi Qingchuan along to hide. After spotting Ming Yi and Shi Qingchuan together, Shiwuru had seized a madman and dressed him in his outer robes and a golden locket pendant, then hit him with a blast to wound him. It was all bait to lure Ming Yi and distract him from the ambush he had planned. It was a ruthless move. There wasn't any solid proof that Ming Yi had actually tampered with anything, but Shiwuru still had shot to kill. Shi Qingchuan couldn't help but look back. When he did, he saw Ming Yi lying, still as a corpse, and then he sat up. The blast had pierced right through his heart. He stoically looked down to stare at the gory hole. I thought it said glory hole. At the gory hole, then slowly rose to his feet.
Yeah.
Shi Qingchuan's blood ran cold, and Shilian could feel it in his own heart. Even a heavenly official shouldn't be able to move so easily after being wounded that severely. He had to be something inhuman. As the two brothers continued their flight, suddenly the hairs on the back of Shilian's neck stood all at once. "Watch out!" he shouted. He yanked at the Watermaster. A sharp noise whistled by, leaving a chilling light in its wake. The Watermaster would have lost his head if not for Shilian's tug. Those invisible creatures from the water's reflection had returned. Shiwuru cursed, then he flipped the Watermaster fan open backwards and swung. Several long, thin water arrows shot from the waves painted on the surface of his fan, and they encircled their bodies to form a protective shield. The invisible creatures couldn't do anything to breach the barrier, and the two brothers continued to run. Shi Qingchuan couldn't help but look back again. This time he could feel his hair stand on end. He's catching up! Sure enough, Ming Yi was about 70 meters behind, following them at a heavy, dolorous pace. Although his steps appeared slow, the distance between him and the two brothers grew significantly shorter, with each one he took. It looked as though, in just a few more steps, he'd be able to touch the hem of their robes. Shiwuru never looked back. With another swing of his fan, 20 or 30 more dragon-shaped water arrows shot forth. With one more swing, their numbers doubled. He fluttered the fan rapidly, and hundreds of razor-sharp water arrows hurtled towards Ming Yi and barraged him from all sides. Though they were made of water, they slashed through the air like steel blades. If he took a single misstep, his body would be riddled with holes, and yet Ming Yi caught the very first water arrow with his bare hands. He yanked like it was on the end of a rope, and with that motion the Watermaster fan was snatched from Shiwuru's hand. The water dragon arrows danced wildly in the skies, dissolved the moment the fan left his hand, and a weak drizzle rained upon them. Shiwuru abruptly stopped in his tracks and looked at his hand in disbelief. Over his centuries-long tenure, no one had been able to seize the Watermaster fan from his hand. He now knew he couldn't escape, and finally looked back. Ming Yi was still stalking steadily towards them with his hands clasped behind his back. He was going through an intricate full-body transformation. With every step, a change occurred. His already blanched face became even paler until it resembled Hua Cheng's bloodless translucence. His forehead grew sharper, his brows deeper, and these shifts made him appear even more somber. Upon his black robes, subtle patterns of waves appeared on once unremarkable corners of hems, woven with thin threads and shimmering with a mysterious silver glow. By the time he arrived before the Wind and Watermasters, although his face was mostly the same, he was clearly a completely different person. The Earthmaster wasn't a martial god, so he had no talent for martial arts, and his spiritual powers were only average. However, neither of these points applied to the one before them now. "What exactly are you?" Shiwuru cautiously demanded. Ming Yi seemed to find the question funny. He squinted in amusement. "You're standing in my territory, yet you still need to ask?" "Blackwater Demon Xuan?" Shiwuru ventured. Ming Yi turned his gaze to Shi Qingchuan, but Shi Qingchuan didn't react. "You've always been the Earthmaster? Or—" "Oh no, that's Shiwuru. You've always been the Earthmaster? Or—" Shiwuru trailed off and seemed to come to a conclusion similar to Shilian's. "I see." but he had only realized that Blackwater Jimin Shuen had infiltrated the heavens. You and I have always minded our own business. Well, well water doesn't interfere with that of rivers, and we've likewise ruled over our own domains, Shiwudu said. It was not my intent to intrude in your territory, so why don't we both take a step back? Well, well, water tyrant. It seems there are times that you dare not be tyrannical, Mingyi mused aloud. Shiwudu was proud by nature, and displeasure flashed across his face at this comment. Since they were under someone else's roof, and his younger brother was by his side, he had to lower his head, but he still wasn't willing to back down. I would have no reason to fear you, were it not at the wrong place and time. Mingyi took another step forward. Shiwudu, look at my face, he said icily. Do you know who I am? Shiwudu stared at him, a frown creasing his mouth. He had seen the Earthmaster a few times, so he didn't understand what he was trying to say. Who do you want me to say you are? He paused for a moment, thinking Mingyi was hinting that his identity must not be revealed. He offered, It doesn't matter who you are. I swear on my Watermaster title, as long as you don't involve me or my brother, nothing you do will concern me. Mingyi frigidly cut him off before he could finish. Men of importance truly have short memories. Water Tyrant, how many mortal names and mortal births did you arduously flip through to find me? It hasn't been, what, a few 100 years, and you've already forgotten what I look like? Shiwudu's face contorted by degrees as he listened to this. There was a mortal idiom for manifested terror. You look as though you've seen a ghost. For the first time in his life, Shiwudu showed that very expression on his face. His pupil shrank to pinpricks. You're still alive? I'm dead, He Shuen coldly corrected him. With 4 fingers pressed together, he swung his palm upward. Shulian felt a sudden pain surge through his skull. It seemed He Shuen's spiritual field had affected Shi Qingquan's body, and they fainted. Let me drink. So remember, Shiwudu swapped Shi Qingquan's fate with another guy, and he's saying this is him.
That's him. Oh my god.
Yep.
Great.
An unknown amount of time. Oh my god, I spilled water. Hold on.
Oh, bud.
I'm a messy bitch. Alright. Lock in. An unknown amount of time passed before Shulian and Shi Qingquan slowly regained consciousness together. Shulian could feel something rubbing back and forth against him. As he sluggishly opened his eyes, he saw that he was being nuzzled by several foul-smelling, hairy heads. A mob of madmen surrounded him, giggling and looking shy as they felt him all over. Shulian remained fairly calm at the sight, as he determined that their peculiar attention wasn't life-threatening. The madmen were just a little dirty, not a threat. However, Shi Qingquan was appalled. He wanted to push them away immediately, but loud clings and clangs sounded with each attempt. There was coldness around his hands and feet. He couldn't move an inch. When he looked up, he realized he was cuffed to the wall by iron chains as thick as wooden clubs. His arms were raised up high. From the look of the floors and ceilings, he was probably back at Netherwater Manor. Shulian could feel exactly what Shi Qingquan was feeling, which at the moment was a deep, searing pain in his head. He tried to bid the Lord Windmaster to be calm, to assure him that he would teach him how to break free from cuffs such as these, but he abruptly realized that he couldn't make a single sound. Perplexed, Shulian quickly took stock of his own condition, and found that a large portion of his spiritual power had been lost. His soul was still able to stay in Shi Qingquan's body, but he could no longer manipulate him or even speak to warn him. Could the spiritual powers he'd borrowed from Hua Cheng have run dry? Impossible. Hua Cheng knew exactly how much spiritual power it took to perform the soul-shifting spell, and he had to give him significantly more than what was needed, and not a bit less. Shulian could sense the powers draining away with each passing moment. It was making him both leery and anxious. A raspy voice called out across the room. Qingquan! Shi Qingquan's vision was blurry, but when he focused his eyes in the voice's direction, he could see that it was Shiwudu calling him. Shiwudu wasn't fettered by iron shackles, but he was kneeling on the ground. His white robes were filthy and in wild disarray. Relief visibly washed over his face when he saw Shi Qingchuan wake up, and he seemed to want to come over. However, his attempt was thwarted. He was kicked down by the one standing next to him and forced to kneel anew. The man standing there wore a cruel, sinister expression, and his hands were clasped behind him. The skin was so pale it sent shivers down one's spine. This was Blackwater Demon Xuan, or rather, He Xuan. There was an altar behind him. 4 smooth, obsidian-black urns sat serenely upon it. 2 shredded fans were discarded on the floor, the Wind Master fan and the Water Master fan. Father, mother, sister, fiancé. Fiancé. Koto, He Xuan ordered. Shi Wudu kept his eyes on Shi Qingchuan. He gave a single word in response. Fine. With that, surprisingly, he heeded. He moved to kneel before the altar and kotoed before the urns over a dozen times. Thud, thud, thud. After this, he attempted to raise his head, but He Xuan's foot came down heavily and stomped his skull back in place. Did I permit you to rise? He coldly asked. This brutal move pinned Shi Wudu's face to the floor. Shi Wudu answered through gritted teeth, blood running from every orifice. No. His elder brother was once so proud that his head never bowed, but now his face was being stomped into the dirt. Although Shi Qingchuan knew he deserved retribution 10 times worse for what he'd done, blood was thicker than water. Ultimately, he couldn't bear to see him like this. Gah! He Xuan's attention was drawn to the sound of Shi Qingchuan's voice, and he was now the focus of that chilling glare. Even though he couldn't raise his head, Shi Wudu knew that meat cry would do nothing but provoke their captor. Be quiet! He barked at once. After a moment's thought, He Xuan removed his boot from his head. Shi Wudu was filled with trepidation, but had no strength to drag himself up. Qingchuan, he groaned. He Xuan languidly approached the wall. The madmen scampered away whimpering. They were obviously terrified of him. However, they still sneaked glimpses at Shi Qingchuan, as if there was something on him they coveted. Shi Qingchuan watched from where he was chained as He Xuan came closer, step by step. The ever-so-familiar face that Shi Qingchuan once knew was now dreadfully foreign. He Xuan crouched in front of him. He was quiet for a moment before he asked, Is the Reverend of Empty Words scary? Though his tone was smooth and calm, Shi Qingchuan was bug-eyed with fear. He couldn't speak a word in response through his quivering lips. The Reverend of Empty Words of the past was already extremely horrifying. The person looking at him now had swallowed the Reverend of Empty Words. He was 10 times, 100 times more terrifying than a nightmare of his younger years. But that terror was something Shi Qingchuan should have endured from the start. He Xuan, Shi Wudu called to him. A man must answer alone for what he has done. It was my idea to use you to ward off his misfortune. This has nothing to do with my little brother. He Xuan sneered. Nothing to do with him? Without blinking once, he stared at Shi Qingchuan and spoke each word with clear enunciation and intent. Your little brother, an ordinary, common mortal, obtained the ability to ascend. His endless glory was plundered from my fate. He enjoyed my divinity. You tell me that this has nothing to do with him? Every word was a knife, and every cut stabbed the heart. This was said for Shi Qingchuan to hear, and though he knew it all by now, he still bowed his head and felt like he could never hold it high again. Wait, who is saying this? You've always been by his side, so you should know very well that I'm not lying to you, Shi Wudu said with forced calm. He's not one to hide anything. From start to finish, he genuinely didn't know. That's precisely why he's so detestable, He Xuan interrupted sharply. Why was he allowed to know nothing? Shi Qingchuan's head bowed lower. What right did he have to suck another's blood and tramples another's bones to reach the skies, all while maintaining his peaceful mind? To enjoy such luxuries without any sense of burden? He didn't know then, but is he still so ignorant? He Xuan added. Shi Qingxuan looked up. His voice trembled. Ming Shang, I... Shut up! He Xuan shouted. When Shi Qingxuan saw his near-savage expression, he shuddered and went silent. He Xuan whirled around and started pacing the hall of Netherwater Manor, growling as he walked. I gave you so many chances! Shi Qingxuan closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Shilian recalled that excessively furious, fine, very well, back when they were in town of Fugu. He remembered how Mingyi had tried to stop Shi Qingxuan from following Pei Ming to the East Sea. But each time, Shi Qingxuan had chosen to help Shi Wudu. I'm sorry, Shi Qingxuan whispered. He Xuan stopped in his tracks. And what good is your apology? He demanded. The 4 urns had been placed directly in Shi Qingxuan's field of view, and it seemed as if they were too jeered at his featherlight sari. Misery pierced his heart and scorched his insides, as if his words meant nothing no matter what he said. I know it's futile, but Shi Qingxuan pleaded. But you what? He Xuan's tone returned to its cold indifference. You know it's futile, but you still want to express your utmost sincerity? Are you hoping you can move me? Make me let go of this grudge and allow my resentment to dissolve? No, that's not what I meant, Shi Qingxuan said hastily. It's just I really am very sorry that I wronged you. Really, Ming, He Gangzhe. I know that both my brother and I are in the wrong. There's no remedying the situation at this point, so... He Xuan was listening intently. So? At this point, any further words would only sound feeble and pathetic. Shi Qingxuan tried desperately to come up with something, but he drew a blank and was unable to continue. Well, talk. Why did you stop? He Xuan asked coldly. So are you willing to die for your sins? Shi Qingxuan was shocked. Shi Wudu couldn't listen any more and shouted, He Xuan! The offense was mine and the reverend of empty words. Shi Qingxuan's sin doesn't merit a death sentence, you... And who in my family sinned? He Xuan countered. Who in my family deserved death? Shi Wudu choked. Go on, tell me, He Xuan continued. Are you willing? I am, Shi Qingxuan whispered. He Xuan sneered at this. Since Shi Qingxuan had his head bowed, Shilian couldn't see his expression, but he probably wouldn't be able to discern what he was feeling even if he saw. He Xuan stalked away with his hands clasped behind him. That group of madmen saw him leave and came to surround Shi Qingxuan once more, hugging his arms and thighs and refusing to let go. Some tugged at his hair, some draped themselves around his neck. Each of them had a ravenous glint in his eyes, like he wanted to eat him alive. Shilian had lived among the homeless in the past, but even he felt his hair stand on end. Just who are these people? Why did Demon Xuan gather a bunch of madmen here? Shi Qingxuan silently endured the pushing and shoving of the madmen, tolerating their pulling and dragging, too frightened to make a sound. He Xuan observed detachedly for a while before he spoke. Do you know who these people are? Emaciated, claw-like fingers felt all over Shi Qingxuan's face and body. He didn't even dare to breathe, much less ponder who these people were. So he shook his head. Rotten fates, contemptuous fortunes, lives lower than an animal's, fates that can drive a man mad, He Xuan explained. Cold dread washed over Shilian. He had an inkling of what He Xuan planned to do. Shi Wudu understood at once, his eyes bulging. You! He Xuan stood between Shi Wudu and Shi Qingxuan. I'm giving you 2 options. He pointed at Shi Wudu. Option 1. Pick one individual from this crowd and exchange your brother's fate with theirs. And then, go make yourself scarce in the mortal realm. Shi Wudu's eyes grew bloodshot and his shoulders started to shake. Since you enjoy switching fates so much, you must be quite skilled at it, He Xuan commented. No need for me to guide you through the process. If the motives behind this punishment were disregarded, then it was truly vicious. Although Shi Qingxuan's original fate wasn't good enough to ascend, it was still a life filled with peaceful luxury and leisure. The madmen, on the other hand, were racked with disease and rotten sores and had been driven to madness by adversity. It was clear that every single one of them was ensnared by an absolutely wretched, miserable fortune. If Shi Qingchuan exchanged fates with any of them, wouldn't that mean he would fall into the same tragic state? Such fates would drive one to madness in and of themselves. He would suffer endless agony and torment from then after. Faced with this disaster, it was obvious Shiwudu had no chance of passing his heavenly tribulation. Furthermore, he would no doubt be banished now that the affair with the Reverend of Empty Words had been revealed. Once banished to the mortal realm, he would no longer be able to switch Shi Qingchuan's fate to a better one. A common mortal with his powers stripped away, and a common mortal suffering the most wretched of fortunes. How could they possibly keep living? Shiwudu huffed a breath and gritted his teeth. And the second option? The second option, He Xuan continued. You. This time he eyed Shi Qingchuan. Each word was spoken slowly and clearly. I won't touch your fate. Chop off your brother's head. Right here. Clang. He threw a rusty knife to the floor. Shi Qingchuan stared at it, his eyes wide. You take a drink? Yeah.
I like this freak.
Yeah, I love He Xuan. And then never show yourself to me again. In return, I will pretend you never existed. His bones had steeped in the brine of hatred for centuries, and it had boiled over all at once. Anyone could see the fervent madness that burned in his eyes. Anyone could see that he wasn't bluffing. After a moment of silence, Shiwudu croaked. I'll kill myself. Let me do it myself. You have no right to bargain with me, He Xuan stated. Shiwudu glanced at Shi Qingchuan. You're asking for our lives, he mumbled miserably. Shi Qingchuan, however, hadn't succumbed to despair just yet. Guh! Let's choose the first option, the first one, he said hurriedly. A moment later, Shiwudu regained control of himself. No, I choose the second one. Shi Qingchuan was dumbfounded. Why the second option? Can't we both live? Good, let's go with the first one. I really can't do the second. Quiet! Shiwudu furiously snapped. Don't you know me? You think I can do it? Lose everything and be forced to watch you become a filthy wretch? You might as well infuriate me to death. Gah! Shi Qingchuan exclaimed. Let it go. Clinging to life is still better than a good death. Besides, really, if you think about it, we've lived for centuries now. It's time to... As he spoke, he seemed to remember just how well he had lived the past few hundred years, and he was so ashamed he didn't dare continue. He Xuan was still watching them coldly. Shiwudu arduously crawled to his feet. He grabbed the rust-mottled knife and stumbled to the wall, then grasped his younger brother's shoulder. Come! Then he whispered harshly. Go find General Pei. Ask him to take care of you. The blade was terrifyingly heavy and covered in rust. It'd be difficult to kill a chicken with it, never mind a man. Both the executioner and the target would suffer greatly if it was used to cut off someone's head. Shi Qingchuan was so horrified he couldn't keep hold of it and kept dropping it on the ground. Forget it, Ge, forget it! Haven't you always told me that everyone only cares for themselves, and that there's no reason anyone would look out for us? Haven't we always taken care of ourselves? Don't give this thing to me! Don't give it to me! Shi Qingchuan, don't be so immature, Shiwudu barked. Then he smiled wryly. Your brother's nicknamed the Water Tyrant. It's not like you don't know that. Over all these years, I've raised so many waves that have shaken the world. There have been at least 800, if not 1,000. I have nothing but enemies from heaven to hell. It'll be easier if I die. If I die, then nothing else will happen to you. But if I survive while losing everything, that's a fate worse than death. If I'm not the water god, I can't take care of you. I won't even be able to protect myself. We won't last 2 days out there. Take it! Shi Qingchuan was so scared he was going to weep. No, I can't, I really can't, he exclaimed uncontrollably. Don't force me, don't give it to me. Help, help, help. He started screaming with every fiber of his being, wailing until he was hoarse, crying desperately to be saved. It's all right, Shiwudu exclaimed. Don't be scared, Qingchuan. This won't hurt as much as exchanging fates or stripping away spiritual power. Hushwan had been infinitely patient up to this point, but now he lashed out with a kick. Shibudu sputtered a mouthful of blood as he was knocked over and hit the ground hard, unable to get up. Shi Qingxuan, still bound to the wall, screamed in distress. Gah! Quiet. Enough of this revolting brotherly love act, he said chillingly. No one here will be moved by you. Shibudu coughed up a large amount of blood. Suddenly he flipped onto his back and leapt to his feet, and then seized Shi Qingxuan by the neck. Shilian was shocked. He felt his lungs cease to draw breath, and blood rushed to his head. Gah! Shi Qingxuan gasped. Qingxuan! I can't leave you alone like this, Shibudu bit out through his bloodied mouth. There's no way you'll survive in the world if I die, so you might as well come with Gaga. He squeezed harder. Shi Qingxuan's sight was going dark, and a death rattle escaped his throat. Shilian was shocked to the core. Was Lord Watermaster really going to strangle Lord Windmaster to death? It didn't take long for the pressure on his throat to disappear. Fresh air poured in as Shi Qingxuan gasped and coughed uncontrollably, then finally caught his breath as the choking stopped. Hushwen stood next to them. He had ripped off both of Shiwudu's arms at the elbows, halting the attempt to wring Shi Qingxuan's neck. Did I give you a third path? He said coldly. Take a drink.
This guy's crazy.
Yeah. Blood pulsed like a fountain from Shiwudu's mangled arms, yet he began to laugh uproariously. Hushwen tossed the forearms aside like they were trash. What are you laughing about? Shiwudu waved his long, empty, blood-soaked sleeves. I'm laughing at you. I'm laughing at how you think you've got the upper hand. Do you think you've finally gotten your revenge after so many years of waiting? Does it feel good? It does feel good, seeing you on the brink of death like this, Hushwen confirmed. Is that right? Shiwudu laughed. Then let me tell you something. I feel good too. He caught Hushwen's collar with his profusely bleeding, mutilated arms. Because I see you right now, so filled with rage, so filled with suffering, so filled with hate. You're grinding your teeth so hard you're crushing them, and yet you're still powerless to bring your family back. You're still nothing more than a ghost of the gutters. Be as angry as you want. They're long gone. But me and my brother, we've lived for ages. We've been heavenly officials for centuries. Even if he can't be one anymore, even if he can't live anymore, he's still profited. I still won. And so I feel even better than you. The longer he listened, the more Hushwen's pale face dropped. His expression was like a frozen, barren land that had been set ablaze with ghost fire. The air in the chamber grew suddenly freezing cold. Shi Qingxuan was terrified to the core. Gah, don't talk anymore, he croaked hoarsely. Can you please stop? Gah, my God, what are you saying? What nonsense are you spewing? Hushwen's hand shot out and seized Shiwudu's neck. You! Have you no remorse? Shiwudu laughed maniacally. Remorse? Huh, what a joke. Ship-sinking Blackwater, to think you're a supreme ghost king. You want to talk to me about remorse? Let me tell you, there is no such thing. Shi Qingxuan wailed. Shiwudu continued, his head held high. Everything I have today, I fought for. I will fight for what I don't have. I will change my fortune if fate denies me. My fate is up to me, and not the heavens. This was the first time Shilian had heard such an interpretation of that proverb. Not simply rejecting fate, but forcibly altering it, and he was blown away even through the chills that washed over him. Hushwen also burst out laughing, sounding like his eyes had been opened to a brand new world by Shiwudu's unshakable tenacity in refusing to admit his wrongs. His expression grew more and more frightening. Shi Qingxuan broke down. Gaga, please, I beg you, please stop talking. Please shut up. Help. However, Shiwudu's smug arrogance was undaunted. Qingxuan, Gaga will go first. I will wait for you down below. Before he finished his sentence, Hushwen placed his hand on his head and gripped his hair. Shi Qingxuan's soul was going to leave his body. The iron chains banged and clanged wildly against the wall. Mingxiang, I'm sorry. We're the ones who sinned. We're the ones in the Wrong. It's my fault. My brother only did what he did because of me. My brother's gone mad. He's gone crazy. Can't you see? You, I. He wanted to beg for forgiveness, for mercy, but he couldn't. All he could do was koto endlessly with his eyes. Hushuen slowly turned his gaze on him. For a fleeting moment, he seemed to have remembered something. He calmed and stopped. The sight of this was like a ray of hope, and Qi let out a breath of relief. The tears welled in his eyes, finally rolled down his cheeks. But before he could speak, he heard Hushuen's cruel reply. You called for the wrong person. In one swift movement, he wrenched Shiwuru's head from his neck. Blood erupted from the uneven stump of Shiwuru's neck as his head was yanked from his body. The far-reaching spray coated Shi Qingchuan's body and face. Shi Qingchuan could finally endure it no longer and started screaming as if he had just lost his own mind as well. See the art?
Yeah.
The madmen found it incredibly interesting to see a headless corpse standing without collapsing, and they went wild with delight. They spun around him in circles, clapping and cheering, their bare feet smearing bloody footprints across the floor. Oh my, he's dead, dead, hee hee hee. Shi Qingchuan screamed for who knew how long, screamed until it felt like his soul and spirit had fled his body. And as the screaming finally ceased, he didn't even remember stopping. When he regained his awareness at last, he had collapsed into a lifeless heap on the blood-soaked floor for an unknown amount of time. Hushuen stood not too far away from him. He was staring commandingly down at Shi Qingchuan from above. Shiwuru's head dangled from his hand, eyes still round and wide. A moment later, Hushuen asked in monotone, Do you have anything else you want to say? Shi Qingchuan's eyes were lifeless. His gaze was unfocused as he stared at the row of urns atop the altar before him, and at those 2 shredded fans on the ground. It was a long time before he mumbled, I want to die. Dream on, Hushuen responded coldly. Hushuen extended a hand towards him, and Shi Qingchuan closed his eyes. At the same moment, Shilian's soul was suddenly yanked out and thrust upward. When he fell back down and reopened his eyes, he found that a red-clad man was embracing his limp body. Huacheng was kissing him deeply.
What do you mean? You can't just...
With one hand gently holding his chin in place.
Why did he do that?
No wonder the spiritual power supporting the soul-shifting spell had been slipping away so rapidly. Huacheng had used the fastest and most effective way to suck out the power he had lent, and he'd successfully called Shilian's soul back into his body. Seeing Shilian wake up, Huacheng parted his lips and began to pull away. But under such dire circumstances, Shilian had no further mind for propriety. He circled both arms around Huacheng's neck and hauled him back down to suck back the spiritual powers that Huacheng had sucked from him.
Sure.
Huacheng clearly hadn't expected him to do this, and in his moment of carelessness, his reclaimed spiritual powers flowed back to the other way. Afraid he was going to break away, Shilian cupped his face and then flipped their bodies over to pin Huacheng to the ground. He felt a coolness
happening.
He felt a coolness pour into his body. It streamed down his throat and spilled warmth into his stomach. Just then, the small wooden door of Puchi Shrine creaked open. A giant green figure crawled outside like a caterpillar. Fucking hell! Which son of a bitch is this bold? Has some thieving punk dared come to my house to steal and disturb my slumber? Achoo! This ancestor's gonna show you a thinger. He trailed off when he saw the 2 entwined figures outside the shrine, apparently wrapped in each other's arms and kissing with fervent passion. One red, one white. Who else could they be? Ah! He shrieked. Huacheng had raised his hand to grab for Shilian's shoulder, but he turned his wrist at the sound of Shirong's racket. Shirong yelped as he was thrown back inside, and the door slammed shut behind him with a wham. Only then did Huacheng roll them over again and pin Shilian beneath him. He pulled back slightly to gasp harshly for breath. His eyes were flickering, his glint dark. Your Highness. Shilian didn't have time to explain. He wound one arm around Huacheng's neck again to pull him down once more. After he sucked down enough spiritual power, he choked out a cough, then cried aloud, Soul-shifting spell! But this time, it was like there was a wall blocking him before the upward swing, and his soul rebounded heavily back into his own body. Opening his eyes with a shocked gasp, he found that the scenery above him was still the same starry night sky, and Huacheng's anxious face. Shilian sat up and hugged his head. I can't pass through anymore, he murmured. Was Shi Qingxuan dead? Did Blackwater Demon Xuan reinforce his barrier? No matter the reason, he couldn't return to Shi Qingxuan's body. Even if he rushed to the South Sea that very moment, he would almost certainly be too late. Seeing how disconcerted Shilian was by this development, Hua Cheng said, "Your Highness, I'm sorry." Shilian looked at him. "But outsiders shouldn't interfere in this affair," Hua Cheng added. Shilian waved dismissively. "You don't need to apologize. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to do much even if I were there." The soul-shifting spell only allowed him to enter Shi Qingxuan's body, and Shi Qingxuan was now nothing more than a mortal. Even if Shilian could help him break free of those shackles, how could he possibly fight against the master of Blackwater Demon Lair? Escape was impossible. After swiftly composing himself, Shilian re-entered the heavenly communication array. "Lingwen, have you guys headed out yet?" "Your Highness!" Lingwen exclaimed. "Why did you go so silent for so long all of a sudden? We've already dispatched a number of heavenly officials to the South Sea. His Highness Qi Ying returned, so he'll head out soon too. But it's not easy to enter the Blackwater Demon Lair. Who knows when we'll find them?" "Wait, I'll go with you all," Shilian croaked. "Maybe I'll still remember the way, but I'll need to trouble you to send someone to pick me up from Puchi Shrine." "Very well, he just arrived," Lingwen said. Slightly confused, Shilian turned his head to look. Hua Cheng had disappeared, but he spotted 2 junior officials walking towards the shrine from the direction of Puchi village. Behind them was a tall young man with curly raven locks. It was Xuan Yizhen. Shilian inclined his head to greet him. Xuan Yizhen didn't understand that he should return the courtesy, but Shilian hardly minded. He looked around. He didn't see any trace of Hua Cheng anywhere, and Shilian knew that he was giving him space to deal with this affair. The 2 of them, accompanied by the junior officials, left for the South Sea. At Shilian's suggestion, they went out of their way to gather dozens of hefty coffins that had carried the dead to prepare for any unexpected situations. After they had raced over the waters for about 6 hours, they happened upon a bizarre sight. The corpses of a number of giant bonefish floated lifelessly on the sea's surface, and their remains knocked into the ship as they sailed along. Many of the heavenly officials were alarmed. "Are we there?" "We can't be," Shilian said. "If we had entered the Blackwater Demon Lair, the ship wouldn't still be afloat or moving this quickly." That said, they were clearly sailing through the aftermath of General Pei and Watermaster's battle from the previous night. As they sailed, Xuan Yizhen perched on his heels on the ship's railing, maintaining the high difficulty position with ease. Suddenly, he asked a question. "There's a black island ahead. Is that the one?" Shilian squinted to look, and sure enough there was a shadowy landmass not too far away, and it did resemble Blackwater Island. Shilian frowned slightly. "It does look like it. But how have we found it so easily? And the ship didn't sink either. Please remain vigilant, everyone. This might be a trap." As soon as he spoke, he realized it wasn't. This was because he spotted a figure on the beach slashing at logs with a sacred sword that was meant for battle. The figure was building coffins underneath the hot sun. There were already 3 completed ones set to the side, and a 4th was in progress. Shilian started waving. "General Pei! General Pei, that's the island without a doubt!" The ship immediately changed tack and sailed swiftly to their new destination. When Pei Ming saw the reinforcements had arrived, he didn't appear particularly delighted. Instead, he stabbed the sword into the ground and rubbed at his nose. "What the heck? You had to show up just as I finished making these?" he said, sounding grim. "It's amazing that anyone showed up at all," Xuan Yuzhen said. "When they heard it was to save you, suddenly no one had time." Pei Ming's expression seemed to indicate that he couldn't be bothered with children, and he turned to Shilian. "Your Highness, you went back first? How did you manage to get this ship to float on the water of Demon Lair?" "I don't think it's the ship," Shilian said. "The Blackwater Demon Lair's curse has dispersed." Still perplexed, Pei Ming tested this theory. Sure enough, he felled a thicket of large trees with just one swing of his sword. His spiritual powers had returned. Speechless for a moment, Pei Ming shook his head. "Had I known, I wouldn't have worked so hard to build these coffins." It was true. He'd labored tirelessly all night for nothing. He had made coffins for 4, but 3 of them were now useless. The team of heavenly officials disembarked the ship and ran straight for the heart of the forest. The little ghosts lurking in the woods had never seen a sight like this, and they scampered away in fright. There were no invisible creatures laying in wait, when they reached the Blackwater Lake, and no spiritual fields to disrupt their powers. After some examination, they dispersed the illusion cast upon the waters. The iron prison and the Netherwater Manor appeared before their eyes. Julien collected the remains of the black-robed skeleton when they entered the Netherwater Manor, and carried the bundle with him while he frantically searched the place. Soon they found the great hall. 2 bloody shackles hung empty on the mottled wall. A headless corpse lay sprawled on the floor in the middle of the chamber. Its blood had already run dry, and a group of madmen were throwing random objects at it. The moment the heavenly officials entered, the madmen grew even more excited. Pei Ming was stunned for a good while before he dared to recognize the corpse. Shaken, he exclaimed, "Watermaster Shang!" Of course, Julien already knew that this had happened, and he issued instructions to those around him. "Will everyone please search the manor and the island properly for Lord Windmaster, or his remains?" However, no matter where they looked, there was no trace of Shi Chuan on the island. Had Blackwater Demon Xuan taken the Windmaster away? Or perhaps he murdered the Windmaster then and there, and thrown his corpse into the sea for his flesh to be devoured by fish. Shi Wudu had gone berserk and provoked Hu Xuan to violence. He was dead, but he hadn't been killed by Shi Chuan's hand. Would Hu Xuan still go through with his threat to switch Windmaster's fate? After chasing away the pesky madmen, Pei Ming half crouched on the floor and was lost in thought for a long time. At last he sighed. "Watermaster Shang, you were proud your whole life, but it ended like this. I don't even know if your eyes are closed. Truly, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Life's misfortunes are inescapable. Even as gods, we cannot be spared in the end." Xuan Yizhen, on the other hand, didn't share such deep sentiments. He ran round the Netherwater Manor, his footsteps pitter-pattering everywhere, and wandered into the chamber where they stood for a look. He gave a cursory glance to the dead body and thought it strange. "Where's his head?" "It was taken by Blackwater Demon Xuan," Julien replied. "What grudge, what resentment did the Demon Lair Master hold against him?" Pei Ming lamented. "And where's Qing Xuan? Or the Earth Master? Did the 3 of the elemental officials perish, earth, water, and wind alike?" "It was a great grudge indeed, and a great resentment," Julien said. "As for Lord Earthmaster, it depends on who you're asking after. The real one is in my hands. The fake one took Lord Watermaster's head." "What?" Julien eyed him. "General Pei probably didn't know, right?" he asked softly. "Blackwater Demon Xuan's real surname was He. His name was Xuan." Pei Ming's face changed slightly at the name. It seemed that Pei Ming and Ling Wen weren't completely in the dark regarding what Shi Wudu had done, though the extent of their knowledge couldn't be determined so easily. Everything that had to be reported was reported. Everything that needed to be dealt with was dealt with. When Julien finally returned to Puchi Village, an entire day had come and gone. Julien's steps dragged with exhaustion. When he returned to Puchi Shrine and opened the door, he could hear Qirong barking and yelling. "Dog Hua Chung! Dog-fucked Julien! Have you two no shame? Oh, fuck! What the
Whoa.
hell is that in the middle of the night? I'm fucking horrified! My eyes are fucking blinded! You fucking owe me!" Nothing but vulgarities and profanities spewed from his mouth. Julien was struck by the frightful memory of the night before, when he and Hua Chung had taken turns pinning each other to the ground, sucking power back and forth. He'd been too panicked to think it embarrassing at the time, but now he had nothing to distract him from keen awareness. He almost threw the door shut and fled. Hua Chung had been leaning back in his chair with his boots crossed and propped on the table, but the moment he heard Julien enter, he put his legs down and casually struck the back of Qirong's head to knock him out. Then he rose to his feet to greet him. "Gaga?" Julien nodded and closed the door behind him. Qirong lay prone and bound like a little green worm, and Julien stepped over him to sit down at the table. "Did Geza and Lang Ying go out to play?" "Yeah, I let them out. You've worked hard," Hua Chung said. "No, you're the one who worked hard," Julien said. Hua Chung flashed a brief smile. Then he said, "I thought Gogo would blame me." Julien shook his head. "San Lang doesn't need to overthink things. I really don't blame you. In fact, you were right about this whole thing. Outsiders really can't possibly interfere." After some thought, he still asked, "San Lang, what do you think Blackwater Demon Xuan will do to Lord Windmaster?" Hua Chung was briefly silent before he answered. "I don't know either. Blackwater is rather eccentric. He languished alone in misery for far too long. No one can understand what he's thinking. No one can understand what he's thinking. Shillian remembered that this was similar to remarks many of the heavenly officials in the upper court made about Crimson Rain-sought Flower. Ship-sinking Blackwater had emerged from Mount Tonglu after slaughtering millions of ghosts, and Crimson Rain-sought Flower had done the same. Hushuen had suffered alone for ages, and Hua Cheng couldn't have suffered any fewer years of solitude. Hatred was what made ship-sinking Blackwater. Then what about Crimson Rain-sought Flower? What made Hua Cheng Hua Cheng? Myriad ideas flashed through Shilian's mind in the span of an instant. He shook his head to will away the phantom of that noble, gracious, special someone, and organized his thoughts. Sunlang, there's something I don't understand. This whole business with the Watermaster's fraud must have been done quite covertly, and he deceived everyone for so long. How did Blackwater learn the truth? If it'll make things difficult for you to answer, you don't have to respond. He fled, moved his domain, and even dropped the Heavenly Official Act. What's left to be difficult about at this point? Hua Cheng replied. It's simple, actually. The night Blackwater died, Shiwudu personally went to confirm his death. Because the Reverend of Empty Words only moves to a new target when the previous is dead, Shillian hypothesized. Yeah, Blackwater didn't know who he was, but he remembered his face. Later on, when he became a ghost and learned more of the affairs of heaven and earth, he discovered that man was the Water God. No wonder he remembered, for it was very strange indeed. Why would the esteemed Water God go to observe the death of a random mortal? But that alone shouldn't have made him suspect a change of fate had occurred, Shillian stated. That's why he impersonated the real Earthmaster and infiltrated the heavens to investigate, Hua Cheng replied. Pretty brave, if I must say so myself. Worthy to be called brave and astute indeed, if only he hadn't killed the real Earthmaster and dragged over 200 fishermen into this mess. However, Hua Cheng had to correct him on this point. Gaga, I don't know if he's the one who killed the real Earthmaster, but I'm afraid someone else dragged those fishermen into the storm on the East Sea. That's the end of the chapter. We'll stop there.
That was absurd.
Yeah.
The brutal murder to an insane makeout session.
Yes, dude, it's crazy.
Like immediately. The whiplash is crazy.
It's so crazy, dude. Oh my god, don't even get me started. I have so much art saved on Twitter, bookmarked on Twitter for this exact chapter that I have to send to you. Like, you're gonna get spammed for days, bro.
You know,
it's so good. Wait. You know what we have to do? We have to watch the audio drama scene of this, of the death.
Oh God.
Let me find it. She wrongs drama. Okay, hold on. Let me I don't know what
Dog and dog fucked is crazy.
Dog and dog fucked. I'm gonna put you in the corner, and I'm gonna pin you, and I'm gonna full screen. I'm gonna share my screen.
Hi, Wesker. What's up, little buddy? Huh? My sweet little gay boy.
Okay, do you see YouTube?
Yeah. Okay.
我让你起来了吗？
没有。哥，你闭嘴！小雪，你说。
kinky。
白化真仙，可怕吗？
贺玄，一人做事一人当，拿你当灾是我的主意，这事跟我弟弟无关。
哼，无关？你弟弟，一个天赋平庸的凡夫俗子，得以飞升上天，风光无限，占的是我的命格。 想的是我的神格。你告诉我，这就与他无关？
既然一直在他身边，就应该清楚我没有骗你。他那个性子藏不住事，他真的从头到尾一无所知。
正是因为如此，才更可恨。他凭什么不知道？他吸着别人的血，踩着别人的尸骨登了天。他凭什么什么都不知道，心安理得的享受这一切？他当初不知道，后来也不知道。
兄，我
住口！我给
That's
过
what my
你机
neighbors
会
think I'm doing.
Shut up.
一次，再拖下去，现在就让你渡劫。
我就是死了吃够烂了，要在我哥读完剑之后再被挖出来。
又一次，你当真要去东海？
宁兄，我多谢你，但是不管怎么说，那毕竟是
He gave him so many times to like choose him
我还是放心
over his brother.
先把眼前这关过了再说。
Makes me insane.
每一次都是你自己选的。
对不起，对不起。
看着你面前的骨灰坛，你的对不起算什么东西？
我知道没有，
但是你什么？你知道没用，但是你还想努力表现诚意，希望感动我，希望我能放下仇恨，化解恩怨吗？
不是的，不是的，我没有这个意思，我只是真的觉得很对不起你，真的，你和公子，我知道我跟我哥都错了，到了这一步，也没有办法补救，所以
Dude, he put his pussy into this.
I know, my baby. My favorite. The worst thing is he's like the most like
说，怎么不继续说了？
in tune with justice, so he like knows that his
所以
revenge
你
is
愿意以死谢
justified
罪吗？
but it just sucks that he's part of it.
贺玄，
Yeah.
罪魁祸首是我，是白化真仙，但清玄罪不至死，我一家五口谁有罪？谁又该死了？
说吧，你愿意吗？
我愿意。
Crazy weirdos, so funny.
Crazy weirdo.
玄鬼为什么要弄这么一堆疯子在这里？
你知道这些是什么人吗？
我知道。
烂命、贱命、猪狗不如的命，活活把人逼疯的命。
难道他是想？何玄，你
现在，我给你们2个选择。
Fucking
第
music.
一个选择， 这群人里挑一个，把你弟弟的命和他交换，然后自己滚到凡间去。既然你这么喜欢给人换命，想来这一手熟练的很，不用我教。
这些人，不是满身烂疮，就是疯疯癫癫，全是大凶大劫缠身之人。你想让清玄沦落到跟他们一样，你太狠了。
不如你。
那第二个呢？
第二个，你。我不动你的命，你就在这里，用这把刀把你哥的头给我割下来，然后永远都别出现在我面前。这样，我可以当你在这世上不
Bro,
存
he
在。
wanted Qixuan to choose him over his brother. Sorry. They make me insane.
And he never
He
did.
never did, and then in the end, he called the wrong name.
每次跟我讨价还
He
价。
never saw him for who he was.
你这是要我们的命啊！
That's
It's devastating. And Shi Wudu is like, you're better off just fucking killing yourself than living without me because he doesn't respect Xu Qingchuan fundamentally. He's like, you'll never make it without me, let's just kill ourselves
yeah.
咱们都活着不好吗？
It's like no, bitch.
And his brother always shit on him for changing forms too, but He Xuan would change forms with him in an instant. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. But Xi Qingchuan couldn't let go of the brotherly
变成那种烂泥巴地
thing,
里的东
obviously.
西，
So it's tragic.
我就行啊！
Yeah.
你不如气死我！
His brother was always so mean to him
活
too.
着。再说，其实你想想，咱们本来就该，我们就该。
选吧。
Dude.
把刀拿好，出去之后找裴将军，求他照应你。这刀修成这样了，下手要用力，听清楚了吗？动手！
算了，你不是说过吗？世界上的人都是自己管自己，别人哪会照应我们呀？别给我这东西，你别给我。
清玄，别这么没出息！
And then he still doesn't choose him.
清玄，
The only good thing
喝口水和
I
甜
think Shi Wudu has ever done is like
你又不是不知道，
basically provoke He Xuan so much that Xi Qingchuan didn't have to kill his brother.
Yeah.
一切也有八百，天上天下都是仇家。我死了倒还好说，
Definitely purposeful.
我要没死，却什么都没有了，那才是生不如死呢。别说照应你，只怕我们兄弟俩没过2天就拿着。
Also, Shi Wudu's like the god of wealth and is like so obsessed with wealth he can't imagine living as like a poor beggar on the street. He's like, that's worse than
清
death.
玄，清
It's
玄
like, bro, so privileged. It's
Right.
crazy.
清玄，清玄，没事，没事了，不用怕，清玄，不如换命和抽法力疼。
闭嘴！少在我面前表演你们令人作呕的兄弟情了。这里可没人会为你们感动。
在这个样子，我放心不下。我死了，你也肯定没法在世上活了。不如跟哥哥一起走吧。
This was crazy. He's like, alright, I'll just strangle you because it's better.
Yeah.
Cuts his arms off.
Yeah.
不想要这双手了，我就
Damn. Your hand.
我给你第3条路了吗？你笑什么？
我笑你，以为自己稳占上风，你觉得自己隐忍多年，如今终于报仇了，很痛快吗？
看你这副苟延残喘的样子，的确痛快的很。
It's a real pleasure.
是吗？那我告诉你，我也痛快的很。因为我看到你现在这么愤怒，这么痛苦，恨得牙都要咬碎了，但你还是救不回你的亲人，还是这阴沟里的鬼。
He's
再怎么
crazy
叫
for
叫也没
that.
有用，因为他们早就死了。
Yeah, he deserves
He's like,
it.
I know your exact
弟
insecurity.
多活了这么久，当了几百年的神官，就算他现在没得当，活不了，那也是他赚了，还是我赢了。我不比你痛快吗？啊，哥，你别说了。
He just lets him yak.
分毫没有悔过之心。我说霸道先生吧。悔过之心，笑死人了。亏你还是绝境鬼王，你跟我谈悔过之心？告诉你，我没有这种东西。今天我得到的一切，都是我自己挣来的。没有的东西我自己挣，没有的命我就自己改。我命由我不由天。好一个我命由我不由天！哥，好，我记住了。好，救命啊！清玄。
He's literally begging Big Sean for help.
先走一步了，在下面等着你。
Jesus Christ.
I know, dude.
这错都是我们的错，是我的错。我哥都是因为我才这样的，他都是因为我，他疯了，我哥他疯了，他是疯了。
你喊我什么？
医生，
你叫错人了。
Reasonable crash out.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So how long was he infiltrating?
Hundreds and hundreds of years.
That's
Like, they were
fucking
best friends for
crazy.
hundreds of years.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So were they not friends? Like, was the real Earthmaster not friends with him before that?
No.
That then?
Real Earthmaster never got a chance to ascend.
Oh
He never got a chance to
my
ascend because
God!
He Xuan imprisoned him before he could ascend and took his place in the ascension. So he was there the whole time as a spy for himself, and then struck up a deal with Hua Cheng, was like, I'll spy for you too.
你有没有什么想
Man.
说的？我想死。你想得倒美。
getting to it. It's happening.
Such a whiplash.
It is so funny.
Whoa.
I remember reading this for the first time and getting pissed that I didn't get, like, to know what happened to Shichichuan.
No, it's
Like,
it's
right
like,
away.
dude, my emotions. Oh, guys, stop!
Guys, stop. His best friend just fucking got
Literally,
tortured.
the worst possible thing just happened.
Literally.
不行，我得回去。算了，都算了。
So funny.
They're just fucking rolling over.
Their tongues are battling for dominance, bro.
They literally are.
The fucking
Pachang is
jungle
literally-
music, the like
yeah.
bongos. Stop, there it is.
Pachang is literally like, holy shit. What is this?
It's Chirong.
No, the music.
It's Chirong's silly music.
They needed like a moment of like,
It's still happening. Yeah, they needed
yeah.
a moment of reprieve after that fucking heavy.
yeah, after that terrible experience.
It's only gonna get worse.
这下以后能大
Great. Guys.
Ugh, my favorite character.
They were swapping spit.
Yeah.
过不去了。殿下，抱歉，但是这事旁人没法插手。你不用道歉。其实，就算我在那里，也帮不了太多忙。水师大人已经死了，风氏又是凡人之躯。我问问上天庭情况如何了。
Yeah.
Imagine making out with this beauty, and then he's like, hold on, I gotta make a call.
Yeah. I have to send you so much stuff now, man.
That's
I'm gonna
just
go
crazy.
Sometimes I offend others by saying
That's
what I'm
fucked
thinking,
up.
even if I don't
Fucking
mean
you
to.
too.
Okay. Who
Oh.
amongst us has not offended